Evening. The time is now 6:30, and I'm going to call to order tonight's meeting of the Merrimack Planning Board. I'd like to remind everyone, if you speak before the board, to make sure that your microphones are turned on and to speak clearly into the microphones. Also, give us your name and address before you start speaking. The next planning board will be December 6th at 6:30 in this room, the Matthew Thornton room. Looking at the members tonight, Halim, I'm going to put you in a voting spot for Bob Best. Okay. Next on the agenda is the Planning and Zoning Administrator's Report. Robert, what do you have for us tonight?
I have nothing tonight, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Robert. We're moving along already. Next is the consent agenda. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at it? Tonight, all we should have on it is a regional impact determination for Starton Realty. If anybody has any questions on it, otherwise I can entertain a motion regarding the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Christensen, seconded by Ms. Healy. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? That is 5-0-0. Next up is the first actual item on the agenda is Merrimack Smiles as the applicant and Siam 04 Realty LLC as the owner. This is a review for consideration of final approval for an amendment to a previously conditionally approved site plan to modify the dimensions of a proposed dental office building from approximately 4,500 square feet to approximately 5,600 square feet. The parcel is located at 75 Daniel Webster Highway in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. This is tax map 2D, lot 028, case number Planning Board 2022-16. Applicant, if you could introduce yourselves, and then, actually, before we get to that, I always skip it. Robert, do you have anything to say on this item?
Sure,
I always
just by way
forget
of,
about you over there.
No problem. Just by way of summary, this is a project that the board conditionally approved back on May 3rd. Applicants worked since that time to address all of their conditions of approval, and at this time, staff has deemed those conditions to have been completed. The reason they're back here is because on the final plan, they have shown a slight increase to the size of the building, which represents a difference from what was conditionally approved. So there's a process 670 or RSA 676:4, which allows the planning board to hold a public hearing to go over the changes that took place, since they are not administrative in nature. And should the board vote to approve those changes, the board can proceed with final signatures tonight of that plan, so the applicant can move forward, getting it recorded and pulling pre-construction meeting and building permits.
Thank you, Robert. Applicant?
For the record, I'm Mira Cousins, engineer civil design consultant.
Mira, pull the mic closer to you and make sure it's a bright green.
Mira Cousins, civil
you
design consultant.
Thank you, Ms. Cousins.
I'm also here with the architect Ken File with LYF Architects. We're here representing Merrimack Smiles for the proposed dental office at 75 Daniel Webster Highway. So you may remember we were last here on May 3rd. Where we had been issued a conditional final approval for the proposed dental office. So between the issuance of the conditional approval and the latest submittal, we received a DOT permit for the proposed driveway and sidewalk within the state right-of-way. Additionally, we addressed all remaining town staff and peer reviewer comments. There are some minor modifications to the plans that we submitted for final approval that I would like to highlight and go through. So the first is we eliminated the basement level of the building. So the foundation will now be slab on grade. The owner would like to expand the building width by an additional 20 feet to account for the removal of the basement level office areas. The building footprint in the original plans was approximately 4,500 square feet. This modification now proposes a building footprint of approximately 5,600 square feet. So that's an additional 1,100 square feet of building area. So by expanding the width of the building, we had to shift the parking lot and stormwater basin approximately 10 feet towards the east. The increase in impervious area is approximately the same, so there was no changes to the size of the stormwater basin. Other changes included vertical granite curbing along the eastern and southern perimeter of the parking lot has been eliminated. The vertical curbing will remain along the western perimeter of the parking lot. Also, a portion of the sidewalk that connected the walkway from the building to Daniel Webster Highway has been eliminated. Now Ken will go through all the building changes.
Yes, architecturally, and I'll just go ahead and yes, architecturally due to construction costs, we eliminated. There were some changes that need to be made, and it is essentially the same building that you all saw back in May. And we, as Mira said, we eliminated the basement and we extended the rear of the building by 20 feet to bring up some of that program space. I'll go ahead and highlight where this area is.
Ken, there's a, stand up mic, right there, grab that.
Excellent, thank you. This is our 20-foot addition right here. The remainder of the program stayed the same. And then architecturally, this is the 20-foot section that was added right here. Everything you saw from the street remains the same. The architectural elements are all still the same. So again, it was a minor architectural modification, but a big deal to remove the basement for when it came to construction costs. So that's architecturally, that's the changes that were made.
Okay. No.
So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So you said that this results in a negligible change in stormwater runoff?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Board members, if you have any other questions? Seems pretty straightforward.
Does it change your snow storage?
Nope, the snow storage areas remain the same as it was before.
I'm good.
The back 20 feet, it looks like there's no additional windows. Am I missing something?
There's a few. So, well, I'll show you here. So this 20 feet right here.
Yep.
The windows are actually in the staff lounge area.
Mm-hmm.
This is locker room changing
Okay.
stuff. But we have a door, window, double door window.
Okay.
So the staff lounge,
Yeah, yeah.
which is more open to the woods, and then the staff entry from the back.
Okay.
Board members, no other questions? We can move to the public hearing. Time is now about 6:38. I'd like to open this public hearing up. Anybody in the public that'd like to say anything about this item, please step forward. Not. And sir, please step to the mic if you could introduce yourself, name and address, and tell us what you have. Yep, right there.
My name is Bill Fallon, 12 Merrimack Drive. I just have
Bill, stand close to the mic so that they can pick it up on the,
You can spin it around. There you go.
there you go.
Thank you.
just have a concern about the sidewalks. She said they were eliminating part of the sidewalks. That
We can ask, so if that's your question, we can address it. If you have any other questions.
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I just I live in the area. I would just like to know, make sure that the sidewalks are going to be the length of,
Still there? Yeah.
still there.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon.
They're only eliminating
The connection
the
from
connection
the building.
from the building to the sidewalk. They're not eliminating any sidewalk.
So the sidewalk on the street will remain.
Yeah.
It's just the pedestrian way on the property will be deleted.
Correct, yep.
Oh, thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak? Not seeing any, I'm going to close the public hearing. Board members, any further questions? If not, we can entertain a motion.
All right, I will so move that we approve Merrimack Smiles applicant and Sam 04 Realty LLC owner. Review for final consideration of final approval for an amendment to the previously conditionally approved site plan to modify the dimensions of a proposed dental office building from approximately 4,500 square feet to approximately 5,600 square feet. Parcel is located at 75 DW Highway in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 2D, lot 028, case number PB 2022-16.
Motion
Second.
made by Ms. Christensen, seconded by Ms. Healy.
There's a
Robert?
condition in the staff memo.
It's subject to condition in the staff memo.
There you go. Does your second still stand, Ms. Healy?
Yes.
Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? That's 5-0-0. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you very
Christensen.
much.
File, thank you.
One down.
Next item on the agenda is Hoyle Tanner and Associates as the applicant and BAE Systems Incorporated as the owner. This is continued review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of a site plan for the construction of a 5,000 square foot support building, 2 radome structures, and other associated improvements. The parcel is located at 130 Daniel Webster Highway in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. That's tax map 2D, lot 6. This is case number Planning Board 2022-35. This item is continued from the October 18th Planning Board meeting. If the applicant could introduce themselves and tell us what you have, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name's Bill Davidson from Hoyle Tanner, representing BAE Systems today. Hopefully you guys all have your packages. I think everybody's probably pretty familiar with BAE Systems, but it's 130 Daniel Webster Highway. It's in I-1 as well as the the Aquifer Zone. We did go to the Conservation Commission a couple weeks ago now, and they had minor comments which we put into this. It also shows up in the memo that Robert has. What we're planning on doing is the easiest sheet probably to look at it on this board. So the project is it's a 5,000 square foot building and 2 radomes. Those are the big bubbles that you generally see. This is replacing, they currently have almost the identical site in Litchfield. They're relocating that site and these new radomes here. The staff that are going to be operating this are already at the site currently in Merrimack. There will be no new employees for this site. It's just a relocation. In the middle is the square building that we have, and then there's a circular radome and then an oval on the east side. This is currently along the Manchester Road, and behind that is Nashua Fish and Game. Not really any, close abutters to that. We have a number of, I think there's about 8 parking spaces that we have, as well as some access, sidewalks and things for the employees. It's going to be served by sewer, water, electric. I can go to C6. Some very minor drainage. There's a small detention pond that we have with a outlet structure, treatment swale. Currently, we are in front of and have an application for AOT. So that's pending. We're supposed to get review comments back. They're going to be reviewing it the week of the 21st. So probably the week after Thanksgiving, we'll have review comments for that. I do have a couple waivers that we had asked for. That there's some comments from staff on that. And I'd just like to go through those if I could.
Yeah, if you give me 1 second.
Yep.
Robert, I realize I just did it to you again. I think it's because you're sitting back there and I can't see you. If you have anything before we jump into the waivers to say about this item.
So at this time, we don't have peer review comments back. We're expecting them later this week. So the applicant wanted to come in and give a presentation, which is totally fine with us. 3 of the waivers that Mr. Davidson's about to go over, staff doesn't have any problem with. There's one waiver request that we are not supportive of, and we haven't been traditionally of this waiver, which is a traffic analysis, which again, we'll discuss in a minute. Outside of that, because we don't have the peer review comments yet at this time, we just allow Mr. Davidson to make a presentation, take public comment if there is any, and continue the hearing.
When you say public comments, my understanding that we haven't accepted this as a,
That's, yeah, correct. Actually, you're right. Don't, I wouldn't even go that far, because of the fact that we don't have the traffic, which also hinges on the fact that Mr. Davis is requesting the waiver.
Correct.
But staff doesn't want the board to take action on the waivers until we get peer review back.
understood.
Yeah, so we
So
will
we'll have
continue
to
before that.
postpone the hearing
Yep.
as well.
Thank you.
Please, Mr. David.
Understood. And the reason we wanted to come tonight, and we realize that there's some things to work through here or whatever, but BAE is kind of under a pretty tight deadline of getting this facility up and running, because it's going to replace the one in Litchfield that I believe it was a June 30th that they're targeting. So once this all gets through approvals and AOT and such, they're gonna pretty much start construction immediately so that they can meet that deadline. So thought it was better to come here, at least get everybody familiar with everything
Yeah.
and what we're talking about. So there's 4 waivers that we're requesting, and Robert alluded to 3 are pretty straightforward. One's section 4.12A, which is existing conditions plan. Typically, we would do a boundary with meets and bounds on the whole thing. This particular piece is 135 acres. We're doing a small piece of it. It's BAE. They own a lot of the land around it. So we're asking for a waiver on that. The other 2 that aren't in question is a section 4.14, which is landscaping, and then section 4.16 illumination plan. So landscaping, this isn't open for the public. It's a pretty secure facility. Not any real reason to have public there for the landscaping illumination. We are going to have vegetation and things, but just not a formal landscaping plan as you would see in a retail development or such. So those 3, I think that staff is supportive of. The one that they weren't supporting was the traffic impact analysis. So we went through this, and I actually talked to Robert about this a couple times. So there's going to be no new employees at this facility for this use. So in reality, there's going to be no impact to the traffic. There's a signalized intersection there at the entrance of BAE, and the way that the Merrimack regulations are written, there's either a full, short, or minor for traffic impact analysis, and minor being the least impact analysis. But what it requires is that you do a trip generation. Well, I already know that we're not going to have any more trip generation because we don't have any new employees for it. So to go through the process, we just thought we'd ask for a waiver. If it's absolute that it won't be granted, I can write a letter that basically says the same thing as what my waiver is requesting, but go through that process if it doesn't want to set a precedent. But that was the reason that we asked for that waivers. I don't know if it makes sense to everybody, but
Understandable.
so yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. And
Board members, questions? I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. Ms. Healy?
So this particular segment of the building for the domes would go behind, if I'm looking from an east to west location, and I'm standing on Daniel Webster Road, it's actually behind, if you will, the current dome that's already there. Yeah, because
If you,
Grab the stand up, Mike, please.
is that okay?
yes, thank you.
So if you look on sheet C3, our existing conditions plan, this is currently a fenced in area that we have That is where the project is taking place. In the bottom, there's a tax map sketch that shows DW Highway. This is Manchester Street, and then Al Paul Lane with the Nashua Fish and Game right behind it. So, you know, there is some trees along Daniel Webster Highway, but I'm
Not a
su-
lot.
Yeah, there's not a lot.
So in other words, as people are driving by or coming into the town, what they're seeing is not only the existing dome, but another couple of domes behind it from a visual impacts. So what are you doing along DW in order to block some of that view, if you will? Anything?
No, we were not planning, I'm not aware of any plans that they were for, I mean, these radomes are fairly high. I mean, it's a good distance away from, you know, you're probably about 1,400 feet away from DW Highway.
Can still
That-
see them.
I agree, but, you know, where these are fairly decent sized structures, it's gonna be difficult to put any types of trees that's gonna,
It's a good time to start when they're young. Thank you.
Board members, any other questions? If not, we have obviously not accepted this, and staff is recommending a continuance to wait before.
Before you do, if you don't mind, can you give the applicant some feedback on whether or not, like, on whether or not you would support the traffic waiver? So, because that would hinge on acceptance.
Board members' thoughts? I mean, as the applicant states, there is no new.
Normally I go along with staff, but on this one, I think I have a problem with the waiver for traffic.
Yeah.
Based on the description.
So my father actually used to work at BAE, and he worked in the radomes, and I've been in both the Litchfield facility and Merrimack, and there's very little. There's like 2 or 3 people there max.
Plus, given where it is in the town, the size of the road that supports that area, I would have no issue as well.
Thank you. So with that, staff actually, in the initial recommendation in the staff memo, we put December 20th. Given that we are expecting peer review comments to come in this week, and there are really about 3 weeks until the next meeting on December 6th, we would change that and recommend December 6th to move forward.
As the next meeting.
Is that okay?
that is fine. Yeah, we'd
Better for you.
that would be better for us, correct.
Can entertain a motion, members?
I would move to continue this to the December 6th meeting.
I'll second.
I'll second. Hey, Barb.
Seconded by Miss Ely. There you go.
Alright.
Any questions? All in favor of the continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? That's 5-0-0.
Great.
Thank you
very
Mr.
much.
Davis, and I'll
Appreciate
see you
your
then.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item number 6. This is Black Diamond Holdings, LLC as the applicant and MM Realty Trust as the owner. This is continued review for final approval of a site plan for the redevelopment of an existing automotive/junkyard use into a 102,600 square foot warehouse
Say that 3 times
and
fast.
associated site improvements. The parcel is located at 734 Daniel Webster Highway in the C2 General Commercial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. That's tax map 7E, lot 31, case number planning board 2022-36, and this item is continued from October 18th. Robert, what do you have on this?
With this particular application, the applicant today submitted a request to continue to the December 20th meeting, and you should have that letter in front of you.
Thank you, Robert. Board members?
I would so move.
I'll second.
Board member Mr. Dano, seconded by Ms. Christensen. Any questions?
To December 6th,
21st.
21st.
21st is what they.
Okay.
20th.
Sorry, yes.
Yep, good.
Right? Yeah, 20th. Any questions? All in favor of the continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining. That's 5-0-0 to continue to the 20th. Moving along here. Next on the agenda is item number 7. John J. Flatley Company as the owner and applicant. This is continued review for final approval of an amendment to a previously approved mixed-use development conditional use permit, calling for the replacement of the previously proposed 20,000 square foot planned retail space with a 52,000 square foot self-storage facility. The parcels are located at 645, 673, 685, 703, and 707 Daniel Webster Highway and 5 Gilbert Drive in the I-1 Industrial, Aquifer Conservation, and Wellhead Protection Districts. Those are tax map 6E, lots 3-1, 3-3, 3-4, 3-5, 3-6, and 3-7. Case number Planning Board 2022-38. This item is continued from the October 18th Planning Board meeting. Robert, what do you have for us on this item?
So for this particular item, the applicant has not submitted any new or revised plans or information since the last meeting. Peer review comments for the traffic impact analysis came in, resulting in 6 pages. Their conclusion reads, "We cannot confirm or support the VAI report's conclusion that the project can be safely accommodated with the construction of the proposed improvements, especially for the 2033 Phase 2 build conditions, until revisions to the traffic impact study have been made. Our review will continue after receipt of additional or clarified information." Because traffic information as submitted cannot currently satisfy the ordinance criterion, staff recommends that the board cannot grant any conditional approval to the CUP at this time and either vote to deny or, based on failure to meet that criterion, or vote to continue the hearing to December 20th to allow more time for the applicant to revise their traffic analysis.
Thank you, Robert. Board members, any question for Robert before we move on?
Robert, do you have any details on what they were? I
Happy
mean,
with-
it went right over my head. Any details on the what they're saying about the traffic?
Just that at this point, based on Fuss and O'Neill's review, they don't agree with the conclusions reached they don't agree with the conclusions reached by the traffic.
So
study
they're
that was submitted.
disagreeing with the traffic analysis by
Okay.
the.
Right.
All right.
So they want more revisions, more information to be able to find that it
Okay.
would work.
Thank you, Robert. The applicant can introduce themselves and
Hi,
Tell us
Kevin
about
Walker
it.
from the John Flatley Company.
how you doing, Mr. Walker?
Chad Brannon will be here in a couple minutes. But I guess I'll address the traffic to start with. The review covered the entire development, the entire 150 acres. And the reason it's a 7-page letter is the reviewer took into account. So let me start at the beginning. I spoke with Scott Thornton, who is our traffic engineer from Vanass. He spoke with Fuss and O'Neill today. And the person who reviewed it had never reviewed the project before and treated it as like a brand new 150 acre, here's your master plan. Not knowing that traffic has already been done for the master plan and we are simply taking a 20,000 square foot retail area, which obviously generates a lot more traffic than the currently proposed self-storage facility. The traffic will be somewhere around 2%, 3%, maybe 5% if it's a busy day of a retail development. So we were surprised to see the review and weren't able to get in touch with them until today. We've been calling for a few days. Short week last week, and I don't know if it was just busy or whatever, but so I think there's some confusion in there. To me, this is pretty straightforward. We're taking 20,000 square foot retail and we're going to a self-storage facility. There's obviously a ton less traffic. The study that was submitted shows that there's a ton less traffic. I don't know how more detailed we really need to be on it. We're going to have to submit traffic again when we come in for the site plan also, which we will do. Obviously, at that point, we will submit another traffic study that includes the whole shoot and match altogether. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how the board wants to deal with that. Our opinion is, if we developed that building as a 20,000 square foot retail, we wouldn't even be back here. We wouldn't be looking at traffic again. We wouldn't be doing anything again. We're proposing something a lot less impactful traffic wise, and the result is let's do a full traffic study, which just seems a little off base, I guess, is the best way I'll put it. So
Okay, Mr. Walker, if you want to have the time to have Mr. Brandon join you, I don't know if you needed him up there, but I understand what you're saying. However, if it is what you're saying, that it was either a misunderstanding or a new person working at the firm that we go through, even if that myself personally would be, I'd be a little hesitant to go against our engineer's opinion, given where the site is, the traffic in that area, the input from the citizens about the traffic in that area. Robert, I don't know if you can shed some light on that, on what he said, dealing with maybe some miscommunication or.
I can't too much because I was removed from this. This was
Okay.
Tim's review. So our standpoint would be to continue the hearing and
Yeah.
allow this stuff to get sorted out.
Yeah. As I said, Mr. Walker, Mr. Brandon, I understand. I really do. It's really just this area of town is already heavy, and if the engineers, even if it's a fresh set of eyes on the plans, I'd rather wait to have them come back and say, you know, we agree. Board members, I don't know if you have any other opinions on this.
Kim, what you're saying makes sense, but we've got to take what our reviewers are telling us, and we just need to get a matchup between what you're saying and what they're saying, what they're reviewing. So
I understand.
I think a continuance makes sense.
I would agree.
I agree.
Ms. Healy?
I would go for the continuance because personally, I feel that this should have been done a long time ago. With the amount of building that's going on in that area, as well as we have a residential area right across the street, it should have been looked at from an overall standpoint for traffic right from the start.
It was actually right from the start. It's
Well,
been looked at
it's been
numerous times.
piecemeal for every single phase, and we've reviewed the traffic studies for every single phase.
With all due
So-
respect, it is, we've had a full analysis for the entire site every time we've come in with a definitive plan.
No, I would argue with that, but that's okay. But anyways, I agree that we should continue until it gets sorted out. Thank you.
Seems like a consensus, Mr. Brandon. I'd hate to have you drive all the way here and not say anything. If you have anything to add,
Well, we have another application too. I had very little to contribute to this particular topic because it's all traffic related. But I would say is that certainly the next step in the phase after the conditional use permit process is a full site plan review. And so the conditional use permit process conventionally has always been a much more cursory review of proposal, essentially a conceptual review of a proposal. So from a practical aspect, what Mr. Walker has stated is correct, is that, you know, we're going from a retail space, which absolutely generates more traffic than, you know, a self-storage use. The only thing that I, you know, could request or potentially request the board to consider this evening is, I mean, what we're essentially dealing with at this point is we received a review letter, you know, from your traffic consultant. And so now the two consultants are working together to, you know, come to some consensus. Ultimately, I think for this board to act, you'd probably be looking for your traffic consultant to say that it's fine. Is there any chance that this board would consider a condition of approval subject to us working with your traffic consultant? I mean, we've done that in the past on many applications, so that we could at least move forward and, you know, maybe come back before this board with a full site plan review where we'll be dealing with a lot more details after we satisfactorily address, you know, the review from your consultant.
Direction staff received on that is no. We would be not
I
looking to
would
do
be
that first.
hesitant to do that because we don't know what the traffic analysis even agreed upon, what kind of an effect it would have on what you're going to be building. So I think it's premature.
I understand your desire. I really do. But the list of people I would never disagree with is very short when it comes to this board, but the peer review engineering firm is definitely on that list. So, board members, willing to entertain a motion if you're all in agreement about the continuance?
Barb's turn.
Anybody?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to continue this application to December 20th at 7 p.m. in the Matt Thornton Room with no further written notice to abutters.
6:30.
6:30, sorry.
And actually, does the board want to take any public comment before you do that? I don't know if it's
Oh,
necessary.
we could. Are there any members of the public willing to step forward and speak about this item?
Well, that was easy.
Not seeing any. I want to close the public hearing now. We have a motion made by Halim currently on the table. Do I hear a second? Seconded by Ms. Healy. Any questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? That's 5-0-0 to continue that item. Thank you, gentlemen. Next item is John J. Flatley as the applicant and owner. This is a review for consideration of final approval for an amendment to a previously approved site plan to modify the landscaping plan to address excessive cutting of existing vegetation from the approved design. The parcel is located at 685 Daniel Webster Highway in the I-1 Industrial and Wellhead Protection Area. That's tax map 6E, map 003-04, case number Planning Board 2022-41. Robert, anything on this item?
Thank you. With this particular application, this is a result of a violation of the approved site plan for the Flex Industrial project that's currently under construction. As construction got underway, staff became aware of a violation of the landscape design where the contractor had removed a significant swath of trees along Daniel Webster Highway, kind of adjacent to the highway. The approved site plan shows that those trees were in fact to remain. So staff sent a violation notice to the property owner on September 30th, asking them to come in before the board to revise their landscaping plan to address that cutting of vegetation. And that's why the applicant is now here this evening.
Thank you, Robert. Applicant, just for the record, could you introduce yourself and then tell us what you have?
Sure, absolutely. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Chad Brannon, civil engineer with Fieldstone Land Consultants.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon.
And with me tonight is Kevin Walker from the John Flatley Company.
And thank you, Mr. Walker.
Just trying to get a file to load. It looks
Yeah,
like we're
that's
having
fine.
some Adobe issues here, so if we... There we go. So as Mr. Price stated, we are before you this evening to talk about some landscaping along DW Highway out in front of the Flex building site, which is one of the many phases that we've worked on this particular property. Basically, what happened, and we submitted a few documents with the application package. We actually field survey laid out the limited clearing line for the project during construction. The John Flatley Company hired Hopkinton Forestry and Land Clearing. They went out and cut the approved limited clearing line, and then ultimately contacted the John Flatley Company because there was a number of trees that they considered to be hazardous. There was some that were diseased, and we did provide a letter from them with this amendment application. The letter was dated October 24th, 2022, kind of outlining this sequence of events. Ultimately, they contacted the John Flatley Company, and then the decision was made, on site to cut, a number of these trees down. It was brought to our attention that, there was an issue out here. We'd worked with staff on preparing this package. And essentially what we have before you this evening is a vegetation or revised landscaping plan, if you will, for the area out in front of buildings 1 and 2, which I have on the screen before you now. What you will see in looking at the landscaping is that we're essentially proposing that we install 66 trees along the front of the property. Those trees have been positioned, under the consultation with the landscape architect, making sure that they're positioned appropriately for, mature, growth, and that they're providing, good screening along the front of the property, but also filling in the area where the existing vegetation was. That existing vegetation was primarily tall pines, and so they didn't have a great deal of understory to begin with through there, and I think that's part of the reason why there was a recommendation to cut them down. There was some trees that were diseased, but others were worried, they were worried about them blowing over after doing this much cutting. So certainly the new landscaping plan that we have before you will provide a much greater buffer, if you will, at a functional height. You'll notice that we are proposing in the landscaping plan, the new species consist of red maple along the front of the property. We have 12 of those species. We have clusters of white birch. There's 14 of those species. We have some arborvitae mixed in. We have 11 of those. And then we have a significant amount of white spruce, which is an evergreen species, which I think will be a really nice landscaping feature out in front of these new buildings. And we have 29 of those proposed and scattered throughout that area that was ultimately cut. And so that's what we have, before you this evening, and we're, certainly here to address any questions that the board may have. We hope that everybody will consider this an adequate proposal. I think that the John Flatley Company, is certainly interested in replacing the vegetation here and providing that screening at a better level, but also creating a really nice aesthetically pleasing solution to the along the front of the site.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Board members, any questions? Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Any questions, board members? Ms. Healy.
In the letter from Hopkinton, they don't say what the trees were diseased with. It doesn't say what the species of tree is or what the issue with the tree is itself. So I guess I have 2 points to bring that up. One is that Merrimack has a number of acres of conservation land. And so if we're looking at a particular diseased tree and that is contagious throughout the area, it would be good for our conservation committee to know that so they can be on the lookout for that in other areas of the town as well. Secondly, without knowing what you were dealing with, if the trees were in fact diseased, how do you know that what you're planting will survive?
I know that our office has been in contact with Hopkinton Forestry and Land Clearing, and we asked them, if there's anything we should be concerned about with planting new vegetation, and it's my understanding that the disease is more of an age, over time. So a new growth with new soil around the root ball and so on. Should not be an issue. So we think that, this will be a good solution. Obviously, our client wants to, invest in lasting solutions. So that's something we can inquire with again, and I can get some information and certainly provide that with
That
to
would be
staff.
great, because that way it could be shared with our conservation committee.
Sure.
Because like I say, we do have a number of acres of conservation land. Also, the birch trees you're putting on, are they clump birch or just regular birch? Do you happen to know? Clump birch has a tendency to split apart.
I don't believe they're clump birch. They're called out as 2-inch caliper white birch, so it's not
Okay.
it's not the clump
Yeah.
that kind of comes up from the root. Yeah, those typically are more susceptible to ice damage, so we try not to include those in a landscaping plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Healy. Board members, any other questions? We can move on to the public hearing then. Are there any members of the public that wish to step forward and speak on this matter? Please do so.
Yeah.
Please introduce yourself, name, address, and then tell us what you have.
Yeah, Philip Galt, 21 Meeting House Road. How about some chestnut trees or something, that's elm trees that are kind of extinct in the region. I think that'd be a little bit better solution than just your common red oak, maple. I'm just thinking, aesthetically, it would look more pleasing, maybe get back to some old oaks and maple, chestnuts and stuff like that. If they're out there to be had. sure some of the state nurseries would be more than willing to accommodate him. And I think he's perfectly on line with getting rid of those trees. That was a great improvement on that lot.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Any other members of the public? Sir, please state your name and address for the board.
Good evening. My name is Kendall Smith. The address is 18 Kimberly Drive. And I'm here because I would ask that you reject the plan as submitted. It is absolutely inadequate. I had on Monday I had emailed some photographs, digital photographs of the site to community development. I hope you folks have had a chance to see them. Yes, no? Okay.
Should be.
Two of those were photographs of the site from my residence prior to those trees being removed and after those trees were removed. And you can see a scarring difference. Every morning I get up and that's the view I have, is this horrendous site that it's not going to be put back for decades. And the other photograph was one of the DW highway looking south prior to the trees being removed, and the same thing after the trees being removed. And just by way of example, the photographs I took from my residence, you can see that there's a New Hampshire DOT sign there, showing the turn to going to Webster Green and straight on through. And if that's standard New Hampshire DOT specifications, that thing is 6 feet at least. So you can see how little a 6-foot stick of maple or birch or anything is not going to do anything to provide screening to that site. For at least 15 years. So it's not going to change very much unless you require some additional work for at least. On that drawing, there's a site that was delineated as to that was not supposed to be cut. It was cut, but there are no trees going back in there, and I'm wondering why. And as a result of this, it seems to me that that changes also need to be made to the landscape details drawing, sheet 18 of 30, under the section of a revised landscape planning and maintenance guidelines. I would like to have them add that. Add a second sentence to read, all plantings associated with revision D dated 10/25/2022 must survive and grow 5 years after installation. There are also requirements on that drawing for watering, soil additives, nutrition and weed control. And I would ask that you you include a requirement that that Flatley submits on whatever basis you think is appropriate, reoccurring basis, what they've done to meet those requirements. And I would just note that if you think this is a little over and above, right now, New Hampshire DES requires Flatley to have a environmental person to, as part of the alteration of terrain permit, they're required to hire an environmental monitor and provide independent professional inspections of the project, and those get submitted. Again, on the landscape details, under mitigating impacts of parking lots, and I think this was a section that came out of the landscape design standards. Note 5, which right now reads that they're showing less trees than they were required to do based on the length of the perimeter, because they said they had 900 linear feet of existing mature vegetation. Well, that's all been removed, so they can't take credit for that. So they need to put more trees in addition to those that were there. They said that was the site on note 6 was the site screened to off-street parking, and they said yes. Well, obviously it's not. I can see where the parking is going to be. And on note 7, it was section where they're screening from residents, and in the drawing it said no nearby residents. I don't know how that can be. I mean, I don't know what the definition of nearby is, but certainly, as you can see from the photographs that I've given you, there are nearby residents. Again, going back to sheet 18 of 30 landscape details, I'd like the guarantee to go from 1 year to 5 years. And under the landscape design standards section on those drawings, they have right now, it asks the question, are the planting materials salt tolerant? And they're proposing to use red maples here. And I've looked at University of Minnesota Extension Service, Michigan State University Extension Service, University of Florida websites, and they all say that red maples, or maples in general, are not salt tolerant. So it doesn't meet that criteria either. Section 3.0911D, which preservation of existing vegetation, the answer was yes. Well, they didn't preserve existing vegetation. The landscape design standards for the town of Merrimack requires, when they talk about screening, says screening shall be year-round visually impermeable barrier that may be existing, constructed, or a combination thereof. Well, any deciduous tree is not going to provide any screening in the wintertime. So I don't know why they're using deciduous trees. And I guess lastly, when I read the letter from Hopkinton Forestry and Land Clearing that said that Mr. Walker had given them approval to remove those trees, my question for the board, and I will end with this, is does the developer have the authority to change the requirements of an approved set of drawings? And because they did do that. The drawing said, don't remove this. They made the decision to remove it. These drawings went through all your review processes and were approved. Does the developer have the authority to change those unilaterally? And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Before we move on, Robert, if you'd like to answer that last question he had.
In terms of construction of sites, there are occasions where a plan cannot be constructed as it was approved. Field changes do sometimes happen. This I would not necessarily put in that category, which is why we are back here. They should have consulted the board ahead of time, or consulted staff ahead of time to revise the plan before, to at least account for the trees that were being cut, which is why a violation notice was sent.
So what you're saying, usually if something like this has to happen, it's far smaller in nature and staff can usually handle it at staff level? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Miss, please name and address.
Ashley Tenhafe, 75 Shelburne Road. I wanted to start off by saying that as a resident of Webster Green, and in butter to this industrial site, located directly across the street, I and many residents of the same condo community are upset by the removal of the trees along DW Highway without prior knowledge or permission from the Merrimack Planning Board. These trees, while not large in size, many of them were anywhere from 3 to 6 feet tall, not the very large pines that the Flatley company here is trying to perceive. Were a buffer to our community and the newly developing site. These trees would have provided the buffer from headlights and taillights and people's own eyesights into the living rooms, porches, and master bedrooms of many of the townhouses located along the DW Highway in the Webster Green community. With those trees gone, the residents of Webster Green currently must listen to an increased amount of construction noise and dust blowing from the Flatley site. The trees would have buffered some of that noise, which starts as early as 7 a.m. on weekdays, and a good portion of the dust, especially since, as reported to the necessary regulatory agencies, the Flatley company was not always using a water truck to dampen the soil before they excavated. Their new landscaping plan only addresses a portion of the problem. The north end of the property appears to have a decent new coverage with some year-round greenery, but that south end of the site will provide spotty coverage at best. Many of the trees on the south end of the site will not provide green coverage during fall, winter, or spring seasons, and spacing of the evergreen will not provide protection from lights from the cars shining into our neighboring living room slider doors or master bedroom windows. They also don't afford the neighboring residents privacy while enjoying their outdoor porches or living areas from the customers of the Flatley site, especially those parking along the parking spots closest to DW Highway. We as residents directly impacted by the site are asking for more coverage, a change of direction, or for the Flatley company to work in conjunction with its neighbors for a resolution that is satisfactory to both parties. But as a resident of Webster Green, we are not just here to discuss the new landscaping, but to discuss the major issue that Flatley removed trees without any authorization against the approved site plan. They should not be allowed to just ask for forgiveness instead of permission. This is not how we do business here in Merrimack. As for the report of the disease among the trees, where was the disease? What type of disease? Was testing performed, or was this just a visual? Where is the rush to remove said trees without going through the proper channels first? They should not be able to receive approval to open their site plan for business until this landscaping is fully addressed, both for themselves and for the abutting residents, and should be kept to the specifications that this board approves of them. Keep them accountable and make them prove that they are the good neighbors they consistently claim to be.
Thank you, Ms. Tenhave. Miss, please.
Katie Poirier, 11 Kimberly Drive, Unit 21. Thank you, board members, for being here tonight. So I just want to discuss tonight the violation of the excessive cutting of trees and discussing how the applicant plans on addressing these landscaping designs. Not only has the applicant violated our town regulations, but they have also not followed through with state regulations. I personally have had to babysit this project in multiple ways by contacting New Hampshire DES regarding no water truck, submitting formal complaints to the AOT for the dust and the town community development. Due to the time of the year, the applicant will not be able to install and plant said trees and bushes. As such, I'm actually begging that this board not allow the final approval for the site plan revision, as how do we know if the applicant will follow through on their obligation? As this applicant has proven they cannot follow the rules set forth by this board and other agencies. They claim unnecessary hardship. So how can we find a common ground? I'm not really sure, and that's not really my forte. So I can only suggest options. Add berms. The dug up, in regards to a berm, the dug up of construction sites, a berm around the perimeter will prevent water from outside the site to enter, especially since this site has contaminated soil. The applicant can maybe donate additional arborvitaes to the Webster Green community, because we are now experiencing unnecessary hardship and have to install over 50 arborvitaes along DW Highway because it's now affecting our residents. And we've now had to increase our landscaping funds in our HOA to absorb this. The pictures that were provided from the community development, although I appreciate them, they're not necessarily what it looks like now. The trees that they're claiming were not all pines. Most of them were oak and maple. And the proposed 2 to 3 inch trees that are requested here are going to take a really long time to grow. And it's not going to help us in the short term, maybe the long term, but who knows if I'll ever see that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Poirier.
Oh, sorry, can I have one quick
Please,
question?
go ahead.
Are you able to read into the memo or Joel Folliard's email? Oh, sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
Robert, do you have that in our package somewhere? I know that.
I don't have that.
You have it. I thought I saw it.
Something to Tim.
I thought the first gentleman referenced that. I don't think that's it.
No, he just went over that plan.
All right, I think I've got it in my email if I can read it.
Robert, could you please?
Sure. Hello, I understand that Flatley is now going to be requesting a traffic light to access their potential retail area. This I think had to do with the CUP, but I, as a Merrimack resident and an owner at Webster Green Condos, am totally against the idea of adding another light at this section of DW Highway. The reasons are as follows. Flatley has, in my opinion, been dishonest in their traffic studies as shown in the report from the organization hired by the town to review Flatley's proposal. 2, there has been a dramatic increase of commuter traffic ever since the toll booths were removed at exit 12. On some afternoons, traffic is backed up from the lights at Bedford Road beyond the entrance to the Webster Green complex. 3, an additional traffic light is only going to make traffic situation worse, more snarled and more congested by holding up an already extended flow of traffic. 4, Flatley is already has access to the storage area portion of the full traffic light located at the entrance to St. Gobain. It's already there and fully operational. 5, they can use that entrance already in place on Daniel Webster Highway to also access their proposed retail space and make that work by placing a bridge over the brook that bisects the property. Dollars to donuts, the cost of a bridge over the brook would probably be close to comparable for the expense of them paying to install a traffic light and turning lanes. 6, don't misunderstand me. I realize that, for the most part, Flatley projects will be built, and I realize that also this will increase tax revenue for the town and attract visitors to the area. I get it. However, it needs to be done in such a way that it doesn't overly impede the citizens of Merrimack using the roadways in their own town. A full access to the property already exists that should be utilized as the access point to the entire storage retail complex that Flatley is planning. Finally, please keep in mind that at some point the expansion of the Everett Turnpike is going to hit my section of town. I realize quite well it will not be a permanent state of affairs, but it will bring a larger amount of traffic onto an already burdened roadway. The state owns the roadway and has, so far, refused to do any expansion. Again, I get it. Adding a traffic light to an already burdened roadway with very real overburdening in the near future because of turnpike expansion is a recipe for a traffic disaster, in my opinion, especially since already owns a way to access that section of the project without burdening the roadway. My hope is that you will turn down their request for a traffic light. I also hope that you hold them fully accountable for cutting down all the trees across from my development that they were not supposed to cut down. I want Flatley to be a good neighbor, not an endlessly combative foe. And that is Joel Folliard, 11 Kimberly Drive, Unit 22.
Thank you, Robert. Just for the record and for other board members, the majority of that letter had to do with agenda item number 6, which we have already made known our standpoint on that, and we have continued it. Obviously, the last part had to do with what we're currently speaking about and are in the middle of the public hearing. Thank you, Robert. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to address Phil Galt, Meeting House Road.
Mr.
I'd
Galt?
like to address the Webster Green problem that they supposedly say they have with their trees. And she mentioned a HOA fund that she has to pay into. And as I recollect, there's a lot of pine trees in that development that probably should be taken down because they're a danger to the residents themselves. I think they call them widow makers. You know, you go out to shovel your driveway, and next thing you know, a branch comes down, and that could be 8 inches, 12 inches in diameter. And the family's not happy. And they go and pursue civil actions against the HOA for not maintaining their property. And I think Mr. Flatley, John Flatley, has gone above and beyond his aspects for any type of solution to create a safe neighborhood. And that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Galt. Any other members of the public that wish to speak regarding this item? Not seeing any. I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Brandon, Mr. Walker, the first thing I wanted to ask, which I actually didn't think of until now, how did this affect your AOT permit?
It
Actual
does
removal of
not.
trees.
It does not affect the AOT permit, primarily because we haven't stumped that area, and the the AOT permit deals with land, land alteration, so that's not an issue. There is environmental monitoring going on out here on a weekly basis. Those reports are submitted to the town and to the state, so that's completed every week, at least once a week, depending on rainfall events. So that is actively going on. And I know the state does keep a close eye on this project because I know they receive a number of calls from interested, parties, which you've heard this evening. What I can say relative to the landscaping that we're proposing and the design we're proposing is we do believe it meets the local regulations. There were a number of portions of the regulations that were mentioned and recited, but only partially. And it's important for everybody to understand that, the regulations, for example, preservation of existing vegetation specifically says healthy vegetation. And health is a function of obviously, ultimately, you have to weigh heavily, a forester, somebody that is in that profession who's making a recommendation to remove trees for safety reasons or disease reasons. That is not what the regulations are necessarily referencing. So I think anybody that saw the cutting activity recognizes that the trees were cut for the approved plan. And then they were that way it's my understanding, for a period of time In that period of time is when, Hopkinton Forestry and Land Clearing was communicating with the John Flatley Company about, the condition of that, remaining vegetation. And although certainly there should have been some communication with town staff, that it wasn't cleared all at once. It wasn't done maliciously. It was done as recommended, and unfortunately, a step was missed. But we're here tonight, looking to address that. As this board may recall, we spent many months in front of you with this application, as we have many, on multiple Flatley properties and other site plans throughout the town. And that evaluation consists of an evaluation of landscaping, but also architectural elements. And there isn't a screening criteria along Daniel Webster Highway. There is a landscaping criteria as it pertains to providing a visual break, but not a barrier, if you will. And so, this blend of landscaping, we believe, has more evergreens incorporated in it at a lower elevation, so it will provide a better buffer over an annual period during winter months, etc. The other thing that we want to point out is one of the things that we agreed to do as part of the site plan. The site plan regulations had a parking requirement that we needed to meet, and the John Flatley Company made the case to the board that we don't need this much parking. And the board agreed to waive some of the parking relative to it being built immediately. And what they did and what they proposed is to not build any of the parking along the Daniel Webster Highway portion. If you look at the plans, that's all future parking, when and if needed, hopefully never. But that parking is what faces the right of way, and ultimately is what would cause any kind of headlight impacts on, an abutting property all the way across the right of way. So all of the vehicles entering the property are going to be turning in towards the building, backing up, traversing, in parallel to the highway, and then exiting in the entrance, which is perpendicular to the residential entrance on the other side of the road. So there are a number of elements here that need to be spoke of in totality, and for everybody to understand, what we're proposing and why this is a good and reasonable plan. The landscaping that's being proposed, we believe will function as an equivalent or better than, what was there before. Yes, landscaping does start out, especially deciduous trees starts out, relatively small. The evergreens, we're talking about, the spruce trees are 6 feet tall. That's a pretty good size evergreen tree at that height, and that's spaced out appropriately so that they can grow healthy in their planting scheme. So I just want to point out, those factors. The headlights really have been addressed in the planning aspect. We have no parking, zero, on this site that faces the highway. All traffic will be facing internally. The only time headlights will be facing outside of the project towards the highway is when they're actually using the exit in leaving. So we think that's certainly a good plan. It's something that, we worked on with this layout. As it pertains to, the species that we're proposing, we rely on, landscape architects' guidance. The red maples, although they are not a high salt tolerant species, we're not proposing them to be planted close to, the highways here. We're actually proposing them to be planted a little ways away from the road. So they're not in what would be considered like a hot zone for salt. It's a native species. It's actually a species that exists on this site in proximity out front. as I think somebody said, some of them, the species were oaks, some of them were maples. I mean, we're trying to create a natural setting. Your regulations kind of spell out the species that you recommend. We believe we're proposing something consistent with that. I know just in working with the town, I mean, the town of Merrimack is very thorough, staff is very thorough, as it relates to making sure a plan is followed. Typically, landscaping is required as part of a certificate of occupancy or required to be bonded, before that happens. So anything on the plan is generally, required, enforced, and followed. And so, we're here for a reason. There was a mistake made during construction. It wasn't related to construction activities. It was related to a recommendation that followed. But ultimately, we're here this evening trying to right the ship. We think we have a good plan. We think the plan meets your regulations. And, to our knowledge, there hasn't been any other issues, on this site. There certainly has been inquiries from the state to our office, but we always address the questions and the concerns. And I think that's, the John Flatley Company is doing, the best they can to make sure that, that things are done correctly on site. There's been a lot of work done by them in this area. I think it's been, the projects have been very successful, and they look forward to doing a lot more development in this area. As we've talked about a lot of future projects. So, this stuff on occasion will happen. It's not something that will be routine. We can assure you of that.
And if I just might add, if it wasn't going to be a safety issue, then we probably would have come in. The tree cutter was out there one more day. He said these could be problems. I didn't want a tree to go down, especially on DWI. If it fell onto our site, there's no buildings there now, no big deal. But if it fell the other way and something happened to somebody, I wouldn't forgive myself. So I made the call. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Needless to say, given what you just said, and I know Bob S. is far better at doing this than I am, you definitely should have called staff immediately. As soon as you got a call, phone number, an email, anything from the arborist, our staff is always here. As far as I know, they always get back to people in a timely manner. We've been more than fair with you guys. You've been in front of us for a long time now, for a lot of different projects. There is no reason that this had to end up in a violation notice or a butters reporting anything to community development. That being said, if this does go through, going back to one of the questions they had, when are you planning on planting these? We're midway through November. Temperatures during the night are already low.
Yeah, I mean, it's just probably too cold now, but we also don't have any vehicles out there, and this building isn't going to be done until well into the spring. So as soon as everything's stabilized out there, or at least warm enough to plant, we'll start planting.
So you're looking at
Spring.
March, April. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Board members, questions? Ms. Healy, please.
It's a question actually for Bob. Based on the fact that then the mature trees are gone and the immature landscaping will be added, do we need a new lighting plan or a new review to ensure that there isn't light pollution from that area across the street?
At this time, no, staff's only focusing on the landscaping.
I mean, it's the resulting of the lack of landscaping.
Right, but I'd have to defer to Chad to speak to this, but I don't believe the lighting is anywhere close enough to Daniel Webster that would result in spillover with the loss of the existing vegetation.
Right, and if I may speak to that, Ms. Healy, just to kind of put everybody at ease relative to lighting. When we do a lighting design, we don't account for landscaping to buffer any of the lighting.
Okay.
So the light projections, the point by point illumination, the plans, that's all as if there was no vegetation. And those plans show that we meet all the criteria with no vegetation. So there would be no light pollution as a result of the project,
Okay.
with or without landscaping.
I know we had talked about when we had been reviewing the lighting plans and the parking lots and whatnot, most of the lighting was direct down versus direct out. So, but I just wanted to bring that up now so we wouldn't
No.
talk about it later.
It's a very good question, but it absolutely is all full cutoff down, focused, night sky compliant lighting. None of that has changed.
So
Please, Mr. Daniel.
when you guys have, I assume you've planted other things at other sites. Are they generally warranted by your landscaper, and for how long?
Yeah, I think they're warranted for 2 years. Don't hold me to that, but I think it's typically a 2-year warranty. If we plant them in the spring and they don't make it through a year, we have them remove them. We don't wait the 2 years. If they're obviously in distress, they get pulled, new plantings get put in. Those are warranted for the same amount of time.
Sure.
Until something sticks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Typically, we don't have, for every 100 trees we plant, we might have trouble with 3 or 4, and we'll pull them and replace them. But for the most part, our landscaping companies do a pretty good job with it.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Ms. Christensen?
I've been sitting here for quite a while, many years, and Flatley's a good company. They're a responsible company. That's what I've seen in my seating on the planning board as well as in my business life. I am disappointed that they are here today because that's not what I expect from Flatley. We've all said that, they've said that. I'm going to leave that alone. Looking at what they're proposing, I agree, if you took down a lot of the landscaping you were allowed to cut, that would have left pines exposed. And I've got pines, I've seen them come down and there's no warning, they drop. So I can see the safety issue there, and I agree. But again, phone call first. I'm looking at the plan and what they've done, and I have a family history of trees and planting, so that I'm familiar with a lot of this. You're planting deciduous that will start somewhat small but are reasonable sized trees that will grow. Yes, they will take a while to grow. The arborvitae is a fast growing plant that will augment and continue to augment the deciduous trees. The spruce they're good size. They do provide some buffer. Not as fast growing as the arborvitae, but certainly faster than the deciduous. So I think the mix that you are proposing is a good mix and will suffice for what we've done. I'm looking at the plan, and as what was commented earlier, the south end of the site seems to have a dearth of plantings that I would like to see augmented. I'm not sure about the north end, but I would like to make sure that the density of the trees that you're proposing go the full length of the site. I think that's my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. Dealing with the type of trees, I assume that you dealt with your arborist and choosing the type, making sure they weren't susceptible to the same type of disease, if it was there. If it is still there, sorry.
We did consult with the arborist, and they felt that the species we were proposing are a hardy species. I know, a gentleman mentioned like elm and chestnut trees. Those are more susceptible to diseases, which is why they're not part of, our plan, to be honest. And, the south side of I guess just to speak to the south side of the site, I mean, I felt like we We proposed a great deal of landscaping in the areas that were cut. And so I would just, maybe we can speak to that in a little more detail if we want to add some. We would like to talk about that tonight and hopefully address it so that we can our goal is to get some kind of an approval this evening so that, this can be addressed, and the species can be, put on order with a nursery and available in the spring. Believe it or not, there are supply issues even with landscaping. So, that's something we would like to address. And if the board feels like we need to add some trees, we're certainly willing to do that and to augment an area as needed. So if we can speak to a little more detail on that, it would be helpful.
Did you have any ideas as to what you wanted it augmented with?
Jan, I'm just looking at this plan, and if you look over to the left-hand side, you got a lot of green there.
Is it here?
Yes. Now,
Okay.
go to your left.
So no cutting occurred over here.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I want to see some of those arborvitaes and spruces in that area just to protect. I mean,
Okay.
you opened the can. I'd like to see some
The box is
additional
open, yeah.
Okay.
in there.
And I just want to say that, there was cutting that went up to the limit of clearing here. But we went back out here and surveyed the new limit of clearing, and we prepared a design in the area that wasn't supposed to be cut. We're happy to augment this area over here with additional trees to address that comment. But
Thank
that's
you.
why they're not there on this plan.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, I know why they're not there, but I would like to see them.
That's not a problem. If we added another 10,
Whatever's appropriate.
if we would add 10 to 12 evergreens through that area, if that's appropriate.
Ms. Haley?
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Christensen because, if you're thinking along sight lines as you're driving along, you just take care of that bare, naked part right there. And I think that will help with our neighbors across the street as well.
Absolutely.
To touch on one more thing, the size of these trees, I mean, granted, you can only plant so much of a mature tree. They're roughly how tall?
So the trees in general, I mean, a 2-inch caliper, 2 to 3 inch caliper tree is typically, 6 to 10 feet tall.
That's what I assume.
Are you talking deciduous?
Even a deciduous
Yes,
tree.
okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
that caliper is typically
Right.
that tall. So the smallest tree would probably be 6 feet tall.
That's a good start.
I mean,
They'll
that's
grow.
a
I mean, like I said,
healthy
you can
tree.
only transplant a tree for so long.
Yeah, you
Yep.
can't.
But as long as you've got those going in, you're filling in with the faster growing evergreens that obviously are also denser than the deciduous. So you've got a combination which I think aesthetically will be pleasing, as well as efficient as far as the buffering. So I think it's a good plan.
Board members, any further questions? Can entertain a motion.
I will provide a motion that regarding the John Flatley Company applicant owner for review for consideration of final approval for an amendment to a previously approved site plan, that we approve the site plan to modify the landscaping plan to address excessive cutting of existing vegetation from the approved design. The parcel is located at 685 Daniel Webster Highway in the I-1 Industrial and Wellhead Protection Area, tax map 6E, map 003-04, case number PB 2022-41, subject to the additional comments that have been made at this meeting.
Seconded.
Second, and will that include the request from the arbor, the horticulturalist, as to what disease the trees
Yes.
had
Yes,
that they,
that's part of the
We're
discussion
taken down.
tonight, yes.
Rob, did you get all that?
Yeah, the two conditions I have are that the applicants to provide specific information as to the disease that caused the trees to be cut in the first place, and that they need to augment the plan, especially in focusing on the southern end of the site along Daniel Webster Highway.
Correct.
Correct. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining, that's 5-0-0.
Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Walker, Mr. Brandon, thank you.
That's right.
Next on our agenda, item number 9. Starton Realty LLC is the applicant and the owner. This is review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a site plan for the addition of a gas station, convenience store, and drive-through coffee shop at the site of an existing car wash. The parcel is located at 376 Daniel Webster Highway in the C2 General Commercial, Aquifer Conservation, and Elderly Housing Overlay Districts. Tax map 4D-3, lot 002. This is case number planning board 2022-40. Robert, what can you tell us on this?
In your packets, you will find a letter from the applicant that requests a continuance of this item to December 6th. Staff has been seeking the applicant to establish a peer review escrow since October 27th, with several requests having been made. To date, no escrow has been established. So to continue the meeting to December 6th, staff is very concerned and at this point does not believe a peer review would be completed in order to have a productive meeting on December 6th. So staff supports the request to continue, but would recommend the board do December 20th instead.
I would agree with that. Board members? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Healy,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Dano. Any further discussion? All in favor of the continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining, that's 5-0-0 to continue to the 20th, Ms. Healy?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Robert, did you get that? Thank you. Next, item number 10, Tony Crawford as the applicant and 598 Daniel Webster Highway LLC as the owner. This is conceptual discussion of a proposed car wash. The parcel is located at 598 Daniel Webster Highway in the C1 Limited Commercial, Aquifer Conservation, and Elderly Housing Overlay Districts. This is tax map 6D-1, lot 028, case number Planning Board 2022-42. Robert, what can you tell us?
Just by a little bit of history on this site. This is the vacant parcel that is across from Tortilla Flat, where the old brick office building was torn down several years ago. In July of last year, the zoning board granted a special exception to permit residential use of the property. That special exception is valid until July 28th of 2023. We've received 2 petitions to this point that have gone to the ZBA to try to make a residential use out of that property. One for 8 multifamily residential units that was ultimately withdrawn before they could act. The other for 6 that was ultimately denied by the ZBA. The current applicant is coming before you with a commercial use of the property, a car wash use. This would require a variance from the zoning board for as that use is not permitted in the C1 district that this property is located. This is a concept proposal. They just want to get the board's feedback. Staff notes that there is a vehicular bypass lane around the back of the site. Staff also was concerned about how wide that lane is. It looks to be between 10 and 16 feet in certain areas. And we did not get any feedback from the fire department on this being a concept, but would recommend that the applicant touch base with the fire department to make sure that they do have the adequate width for that. Outside of that, the board may wish to discuss the applicant's plans for lighting the property and mitigating any impacts of the proposed use to the neighbors. I will say that the abutting residential properties behind this site did come out in force against the multifamily. Concerns about noise were raised, lighting were raised, privacy. Obviously, the car wash being a completely different animal than a residential use, but any discussion and feedback that can be had here to help the applicant design their plan would be beneficial.
Thank you, Robert. The applicant, please introduce yourself and tell us what you have.
make sure your mics are
On and lit.
and close to you.
Okay.
Eric Poulin from Jones Beach Engineers. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for seeing us this evening. We're proposing a 3,000 square foot car wash. The car wash would have 2 automatic wash bays and 2 internal stacked self-serve bays to the left there on the plan. The site would also include 6 vacuum stalls to be utilized by customers, a bypass lane around the proposed development, and a car wash stacking lane for customers to stack when the bays are being used. Southbound traffic will enter the site using a one-way driveway entrance, and then customers are directed to either the vacuum stalls or the car wash stacking lane. Customers enter the car wash from the rear of the building and exit through the front there. They then exit by a one-way exit on the west corner of the property and then enter back into the main roadway. The site would include an enclosed dumpster pad and parking for 1 employee that will be on site to assist customers. A privacy fence is being proposed on 3 sides of the property to help shield abutters from noise, visual nuisances, specifically headlights. This is a very preliminary site plan, but obviously as part of a full site plan package, we'd have a landscaping plan as part of that, which we would be anticipating having some green buffer features involved in that. We feel this is a good use for the location. There's a lot of commercial uses on this intersection, and we feel it would go well with the commercial uses in the area. As part of your packet, we included some elevation renderings, some 3D renderings. My client has done several car washes in New England. He does a great product. He really tries to make his buildings look good and be a nice feature for the community. So we wanted to include some of those examples so you could see that this isn't just a gray square along the roadway here, something that'll look nice and be a benefit to the community. As said in the intro, there are some issues from an ordinance standpoint. We are going to need a couple variances, which is why we're here before this board in a conceptual manner, just to get the feedback from the board on how they feel this would go. Getting specifically into the variances, we will need one for the front setback there. The front setback is 50 feet. The 50-foot setback would leave a very small developable area in the core of the site. So we'd be requesting to reduce that to 30. The second would be the 20-foot green buffer to allow for that exit lane to exist. We're requesting that be reduced to 9.5 feet. And then also the third, in this limited commercial zone, automobile uses are prohibited, so we would need a variance for this use. Again, we do feel that this could be a viable option as a variance, given the fact that this specific intersection of Daniel Webster Highway is a very commercial intersection. There's a lot of commercial uses. There's a gas station. There's some restaurants on the intersection. If determined, given these challenges, we wanted to come before the board with this application and give the board the opportunity to comment. We don't want to invest too much time and resources into this if we feel like it's not going to work out. So some input from the board would be great. Although we know that we do need a full design, we would be respectfully requesting, if the board felt it appropriate, to submit a letter to the zoning board, basically in support of this site plan application moving forward to a more advanced level, which we feel like would be a great help in going before the zoning board in requesting these variances. If we were to get that letter and go before the zoning board, we would prepare obviously a zoning site plan, and we would do some additional survey work and finalize the boundary to know exactly what we're working with. If we're talking about setbacks, we'll need to have exact locations of those property lines. That's basically the proposed conceptual layout. And at this time, we'd love to get feedback from the board, and we can answer any questions the board has at this time. My client is here, and he can answer any operational questions that the board may have as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poulin. Just looking, I mean, the obvious one right off the top is going to be buffering is going to be an issue, just given that it's such a small piece of land, and you do have residential units around you there. Board members, any input? Ms. Haley, please.
Although there is a lot of commercial development around that area, it is also a historical area for the Reed's Ferry part of town in the Old Village section. So although is a restaurant across the street, Tortilla Flat, that is a historical building dating back into the 1700s, I believe. If you go right around the corner on Depot Street, we have several historical buildings there as well, age-related. Right down the road from you, you have Thornton's Landing, which is also a historical building that has been commercialized, but it is still kept up. Somewhat, at least part of it is in its original state. The little restaurant right to your north used to be the old post office. So my concern is now you're bringing in a car wash. So, and as the chair said, this is also a residential area as well. So I have concerns about how this is going to play out as far as what is it going to look like. Also, we have a PFAS problem in town, as you well know. A lot of materials used in the car wash industry contain PFAS, and that's why everything slides off the car. Understand that in our facility, we compost. So we have to monitor the compost for PFAS levels as well in order to be able to sell it, especially in some states as well as New Hampshire. So there are I have a lot of different concerns here, but I figured I'd bring up that PFAS for you right away so that you'd know that's out there. You may get a visit someday.
I can speak to that. The chemicals we use, we would the wastewater management here in Merrimack. 'Cause I've already had a car wash in Merrimack here. They're going to
Okay.
require those MS sheets.
Exactly.
We don't have any PFAS and any chemicals we use.
Okay.
Zero.
Okay. So just in case, I thought I'd bring
Yeah.
that up so you can be
Yeah,
like,
because some sites where we haul water off, the same thing comes up. So we don't use
right.
None
Because
of our
then you'd have
chemicals
Assistant
that.
Director Croce coming to see you. So good. But like I say, if you're able to get the variances from the zoning board, again, you think about the neighborhood you're in. It may not be overly obvious to you, but it will be to the people around you.
So I sat through your whole planning board meeting tonight, and I heard the last, quite a bit of the evening was the last project. Three sides of that, it is in a neighborhood. It's a commercial zone. We would prefer to do arborvitaes around three sides because they do create a green fence. I guess I would ask what you would rather see, a white PVC fence or green arborvitaes.
I'll go
Because
for
I have
arborvitaes.
a car wash in Raymond, New Hampshire that I personally planted 45 arborvitaes this tall in 2009, and they're currently 22 feet tall. Green fence, beautiful. So that would really do well on the both sides and the back of that property, and that would really cut the neighborhood off from that site. It's a small lot, so it's going to be a tough site no matter who comes in front of you for this site.
I mean, I would say, speaking personally, and obviously Miss Healy, I would far rather see plantings instead of
I agree.
a tall plastic white fence.
Yep.
So, Ms. Christensen?
This is a tough site.
Yes.
We've tried a couple of things, and I think one of the problems with some of the others is again a problem with this one. This is a very intense use on that very small site. One of the things that the ZBA will look at is, does it fit the neighborhood? It does not. If you look at the neighborhood, as Mrs. Healy was talking about, there may be businesses in those buildings, but those are the original buildings that were residences. This is not an original building. It does not fit in the neighborhood. It's not to say you can't do it or can't make it work, but the proposals for you're right, it's a tough site. It's a small site. It's in an area that just doesn't work well for a lot of things. You've essentially removed all of the lawn. You may have a couple of little patches, but the other buildings in the area have lawn around them. They have backyards. They have just, space for green. I don't see that on this site. I see a lot of impervious surfaces. Setbacks are an issue. Yes, it would be nice to have the arborvitae, but that doesn't compensate for the lack of lawn. It doesn't fit the neighborhood. It really doesn't.
With the mentioning the lack of lawn, what were you looking at? I mean, granted, this is just conceptual for snow storage. I mean, that's a large area that's going to have to be plowed. Would you be trucking it off, I would assume?
Yeah, if you look at the site plan, one of the benefits of the site plan is that angled entrance lane, and what that angle stacking lane and entrance lane helps provide is, given the size of the lot, a rather large green space in the center. We also have some green space page left and page right. They aren't huge, but the lot isn't a large lot to begin with. We feel there's sufficient green space on site to provide snow storage and to provide landscaping and stormwater treatment. Again, this is conceptual. We would have to dig into a lot of these issues in depth when we come back before the board, if we do. I wanted to also touch back on the historical nature of the area. The lot's currently vacant. There unfortunately is not a nice historical building to reutilize, which I've seen done in the past, and it can be quite nice. But what I do know, I have been working with Tony for many years now, and you can look at some of his locations. He really does try to make a building that looks nice and does what he can and works with the towns closely on what they're looking for from an aesthetic standpoint. Cupolas, different facades. He's looking to mesh well with the community. I've never seen him try to put something in that doesn't jive well with the surrounding area or is an eyesore. He's very on top of his sites. His operation maintenance manual, his landscaping maintenance I found it always to be more than adequate. He's always willing to add additional landscaping. He's always willing to add additional screening and buffer. So there's some things here that I think we could do to help narrow the gap. But I do agree it's a challenging site, but I think there are some things we could look at to help alleviate some of those issues.
Okay.
Mr. Dana, go ahead.
So I see here on the plan, it looks like you have a 7-car stack. Is that typical with what you do at other locations, given you have more land, or is that
7 cars
optimistic?
is pretty good, actually.
Okay.
I certainly have a few sites that are a little bit smaller as far as stacking the cars, and some, my site in Manchester's deeper, so we can stack probably 9 cars behind that.
Yeah.
So the stacking is adequate there.
Okay. Yeah, my concern obviously would be if you start, backing up into the road. But
Yeah.
I'm sure generally, in my opinion, right, car washes are generally a opportunistic, spur of the moment.
Yeah, so
purchase.
it's definitely 6 out of 10 car washes are an impulse buy.
Yeah.
If people saw that there's 8 people in line, they're going right by.
Yeah.
I'll come back. People start to learn, hey, if I come at 7 in the morning, there's no line. If I come at 7 at night, there's no line.
Sure. in general, I'm pro someone doing something with this lot. So, you know, I'd be in favor of you doing this. I liked what you said about the trees and the green space. I also like the you know, working with the town to get that exterior to fit in with the surrounding area. I know I do a lot of projects in Massachusetts, and like the Andover area, everything has to look a certain way.
Right.
So
That would be big.
yeah, so doing something similar to that, I think would work well.
So I'd like to add that, you know, I used to live in Merrimack, so I'm familiar with the town. So I've been wanting to get back into this town. The town needs a good car wash, and it needs the car wash that I'm going to put here because it's a friction type car wash. So, you know, that person that wants a touch free wash can get a touch free wash. Someone that wants a little something to rub down their car is going to get that opportunity. Or maybe it's someone that can't go through either one of those and they can go in that self spray wash, which we have none in the town, none. So it's a use that the town needs. You know, we could add some dormers, cupolas. You can make a really nice building there.
Siding.
You know, the building that was there, because I've looked at this lot for years, was unfortunately torn down. And the 2-car garage that's on it now is a square box that could just get cuffed into a dumpster. But we would put up a beautiful car wash.
I did want to circle back quickly on stacking. One nice thing that Merrimack does have, which you don't see often, is they actually have a car wash stacking ordinance. It's 4 per bay is what I saw in the regulations. I don't know if that was site plan or zoning. And it does allow for the stacking to include the row of cars within the building. So we have 3 bays, and I made sure that the design included 12 vehicles shown on the site plan. So I wanted to make sure I kept the relief we need to an absolute minimum. So I made sure the design checked that box from a stacking perspective.
Got it.
Mr. Crawford, for what I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like anybody's opposed to it. Obviously, it's going to need to fit the neighborhood. It's really just that's a real small parcel of land. I mean, I would be more worried about what the support services are going to say. DPW, especially fire department, trying to get around that tight corner.
Fire will be big.
Exactly.
Can you turn that fire truck in there?
I can do a fire.
We
Well,
did-
I could touch base with the fire department and make
Yes.
sure I get their dimensions correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I can run their truck.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, they're going to look at
yeah.
it no matter what. I
Right.
just want to point out the issues that you're going to run into.
Yeah.
Conceptually, it's not an issue from us, from what I'm hearing. Mainly just aesthetically. If we get the buffer correct around the perimeter, like I'm saying, it's really just support services that you may possibly run into issues. You may not. I mean, we have plots around town that are far more difficult than that, and fire says they can navigate them. So
Yeah.
it's really going to be up to
Talk to
the
them.
discussions you have with them.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Board members, any other input?
Does the board have any comments on the basic architectural pictures that were provided?
Ms. Healy, you seem more in tune, and also you, Ms. Christensen, since you're on the zoning board, I feel like I would kind of relegate that to you.
I want it to fit the neighborhood.
Yeah.
The proposed building that you have seen does not. I want it to fit the neighborhood.
So would you provide some feedback as to what you would like to see on that?
Siding,
Yep.
I don't want to see a flat cement siding. I want it to fit the neighborhood, and you say you've lived in town. You know what the neighborhood is. If I showed you something, you'd say, no, that doesn't fit, or yes, that does fit. So you know, I want it to fit the neighborhood because that neighborhood is unique. It's, as Mrs. Healy said, those are old homes that have had businesses put into them. You're not doing that. You're building a whole new facility. I want it to fit the neighborhood.
So are you willing to work with us to do that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to hear.
Are you picturing something like the old
Right.
red barn on DW in front of Synergy Storage?
Yeah.
Something of that type of style,
like
if you know
that.
what
Yeah.
building I'm talking about.
Some cupolas, some dormers, right?
Yeah, just wood siding, not like she's saying, not
Yeah.
flat brick, but
Right.
something. I hate to say more country, but
And I actually sit on the Historical Commission, and I'm a member of the Historical Society. Both of those organizations would be happy to help you.
Okay.
Also look at some things so that it will blend in a lot better. In other words, we don't want something like you were talking about the white plastic fence. No, we don't want
Right.
to see cement, white plastic, something a little warmer. If you look at the architecture in the area, it's not even brick. For the most part, it's more clapboard, et cetera. So,
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing is something that would be a great benefit going before the zoning board would be custom-made renderings and elevation plans for the zoning board, so that the zoning board could get a better feel for what this is going to look like, so they feel more comfortable with the use change.
Yes.
and include the landscape plan as well,
Yep.
so that they can see how it gets blocked.
That would
And
absolutely
have
help.
landscaping. Okay.
Yep.
Is that it? Robert, anything else to add? You get all that? Applicant, Mr. Crawford, Mr. Poulin, anything else?
As far as the so the Merrimack regs don't specifically say car wash in any zone. You have to
No.
get an exception.
Now I'm surprised when you bring up the stacking. Robert, we don't have, that doesn't just fall under stacking of like drive-through restaurants or anything like that.
In the site plan regs, there's a specific stacking requirement for car wash spaces, but they're right, there is no permitted use anywhere for
Anywhere.
a car wash in the town.
Except
So you
all
just
of
have, yeah. So I just want to make sure that we that we all understand that. I mean, I owned the car wash then next to the 7-Eleven already, and then there's a car wash at exit 11, and there's one Fenway car wash, whatever it's called nowadays. So we're right in the middle. I just want to make sure we're okay.
Conceptually, I don't see an issue.
Okay.
I'm just surprised that it's not called. I mean, we have 3 of them in town that it's not even.
it has better potential than the prior submissions.
Correct.
I like it.
Correct.
It's a good start.
Yeah, we work together. We can make this work.
Yeah. If you can pull it off on that land, then
Yeah.
I don't think we'll have any issues.
Okay.
Okay.
Good?
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Moving on to agenda item number 11. This is Merrimack Parcel A, LLC as the applicant, and Merrimack Parcel A, LLC, and Slate Merrimack Acquisition, LLC as the owners. This is a conceptual discussion of a proposed amendment to a previously approved mixed-use development conditional use permit, seeking non-binding feedback on potentially revising the future phase of development to include additional residential units and retail use instead of all retail/commercial and a parking structure. The parcels are located at 1, 2, 3, and 4 Lexington Court in the I-2 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts and Wellhead Protection Area. That's tax map 3C, lots 191-2U1-2U4. This is case number Planning Board 2022-43. Robert, what do you have for us on the site?
So this again, as the board may recall, you spoke with this applicant back in April to discuss a potential change to the conditional use permit to add more residential units on the site. This is a slight deviation from that, a second conceptual discussion for the board's review. As staff understands it, this concept would reduce non-residential square footage in the overall project by about 68%, going from 224,000 plus square feet down to 71,000 plus square feet, and reduce the phase 2 non-residential square footage by about 93%, going from 146,000 square feet to about 10,000 square feet. In general, staff feels the difference between this concept and that which presented to the board back in April is a token amount of non-residential development added to the significant increase in residential development. This change is not significantly different than the prior proposal, which was not well received by the board at that time or the public that was present at that meeting. At that last discussion, Chair Best made a remark that the board all seemed to have agreed with at the time in terms of how to consider amendments to approved projects. As an excerpt from the April 5th, 22 minutes, Chair Best stated that when he's presented with a change to a project, he considers whether or not he would have approved it if it was the original submission, and he would not have approved this proposal as a CUP, speaking to the April amendment. Staff suggests that this could be a useful method in evaluating this proposed change as well. I'm sure the applicant has significantly more to say than I do. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to them.
Applicant, if you could please introduce yourself.
Thank you
and
very
then,
much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gordon Leedy, and I'm a landscape architect and certified planner with Ty and Bond, representing Merrimack Parcel A LLC, the owners of the project. Tom Monahan, one of the principals, is here with me tonight, as is his son Jeff, and our attorney Morgan Hollis, just in case anything comes up that needs to be addressed. That being said, we're here to have a discussion with the board to try to understand where we can go from where we are. A little bit of history. Ms. Christensen knows me and knows the history with my history with this project. I've been working on this project for going on 20 years now. The original mixed-use master development plan for the Premium Outlets project, which included this parcel, indicated on this parcel 15 to 20,000 square feet of restaurants, and I can't remember whether it might have been a 200-room hotel and a conference center. Subsequent to that, the outlet center was built and variances were approved to allow mixed use on this particular site. And that conditional use permit, which was subsequently approved, this was in 2016, permitted up to 192 residential units, 120 room hotel, up to 165,000 square feet of office, and up to 150,000 square feet of retail commercial. So, and restaurant use is in that 150,000 square feet. So the ownership went forward with that plan. At that time, there was actually a single-use tenant that might have occupied that 165,000 square feet. That did not come to pass for whatever reason, and there was an amended conditional use permit and site plan to allow change in the plan configuration and density. So that was the 192 units of residential plus the 120 room hotel plus a 7,500 square foot restaurant. And then there were a variety of other uses that were included in a separate building. And then just this last year, there was a zoning variance to allow up to 208 units of additional residential use, conditioned upon amendment to the conditional use permit and site plan approval. So that's where we are today. And this is that approved master development plan, and you can see that there is the 192 units of apartments with a 7,000 square foot clubhouse. There is the 120 room hotel. There's the 7,500 square foot restaurant, and there is the, I don't know whether I can get a pointer. Let me go back and, well, that may not happen. So
we can see your mouse. If you.
Oh, can you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the thing that is, I can't see my mouse. That's the only problem. The thing that is left to develop is that building G and the parking deck, which was something like 150,000 square feet of retail, commercial, 160,000 square feet of office space. And this was the approved site plan, bless you, the approved site plan that went along with that conditional use permit. And it has the 7,500 square foot restaurant. It has, as a standalone kind of somewhat suburban configuration, the 110 room hotel, as it turned out, and then has a fairly good sized vacant area for future development. What has happened since that conditional use permit was issued was, simply stated, COVID happened. And and the world changed. So there is essentially zero market for office space. There's essentially zero market for small residential or small commercial space, retail space. So we're left with a quandary of what we are going to do with this, 4-acre development site. It was approved for a fairly high density, a very high density use. And as you will no doubt recall, there was a discussion that happened in April of this year that was, not pleasantly received by this board. We've gone back and taken a look at what we may be able to do to both develop the undeveloped portion of the site as well as reconfigure a portion of the approved portion of the site to make it a little more like what was originally presented to the board. And that is a kind of urban streetscape that comes in off of Premium Outlets Boulevard and forms a gateway to this larger development. And so we have a boulevard entry with, and again, I can't see any kind of, oh, there it is. Okay. So we have a boulevard entry that has parallel parking on both sides. We have a commercial space kind of turning the corner and a restaurant pushed out toward the street with a cafe space that might be enliven that streetscape a bit. And then we have another 5,000 square foot commercial space on the ground floor that serves as the other side of the bookend of that. Mr. Thompson in his memo indicated some consternation that we hadn't identified uses. The reason being that we don't know what these uses might be. We are characterizing it as commercial. It could be, we have the restaurant understood. The commercial space is a little less understood, but it could be anything from a fitness center use to a co-working use, like WeWork kind of co-working situation, to various kinds of professional office space might be appropriate. We're not sure what the demand might be. And then we have the 208 units. This is sensitive. 208 units on the upper floors, along with parking on the ground floor of probably 75% of this building. And then, we created some views that show kind of what we're thinking of. And this, I think there is no doubt that this is more than a token departure from what we presented before. We're doing what we feel we can given the market conditions that we are facing. And this would provide both an amenity for the greater community as well as an amenity for the residents that are to be in that development. So some considerations. In your ordinance, there's a lot of language having to do with mixed use development. We have a variance that allows us to do a mixed use development on the site. There is no definition or prescribed standard for what constitutes a mixed use development. So, and then there's language that talks about density, and density being allowed as considering only that portion of the site that is dedicated to residential use. Well, that's not the way this project has gone forward. This project has gone forward as a mixed-use project that has mixed uses in mixed-use buildings. So the only way that I can think about density is it is a means of assessing the intensity of use on the site. So if you, and that's the community's interest as well in density and creating density limits, is not to overburden a particular property, by means of parking and circulation and utility usage and all of that good stuff, and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of both the citizens of the community and the residents of the site. So this proposed use is less impactful than the approved mix of uses. So if we were to go forward through some miracle of marketing magic that Tom puts together and could build a site that had 150,000 square feet of retail and 165,000 square feet of office space in this same place that we're proposing 208 units and 5,000 square feet of commercial, that would be a much more intensive use than this is from a traffic perspective, perhaps from the perspective of utilities. You know, the open space and connectivity in this plan is very similar to the approved plan. And, you know, as a matter of fact, there are over 10,500 people that work within a mile of this facility. So, you know, there is a demonstrated demand for residential use in this particular location. And so I go back to the conditional use permit criteria, which are that the site is reasonably suited for the intended use, and I would argue that it is. That it has a positive fiscal impact. Our preliminary numbers indicate that this development, if constructed, would yield a $1.4 million positive fiscal impact to the town per year. This does not burden municipal service capacity. We have capacity to service, that the town has the capacity to service this development. This actually reduces peak hour traffic impacts from previous plans. Buffers and setbacks are maintained as they were in the previous plans. Sidewalks, paths, other pedestrian open space accommodations have been continued, so there's no real change in that. And it can conform, does conform with architectural design criteria and conforms with the general design criteria. So that's our case, notwithstanding staff's position that, you know, it's not the plan that we originally presented. We know that, and, you know, we apologize for the fact that the world changed, but we feel like this would be an asset to the town, and that it would be, it would fill a need, and that it is a better plan than what we had presented before. So we seek your input as to where we might go from here.
Thank you, Mr. Leedy. Would you like to start?
I've been here since the beginning.
I know that.
And I noticed that they brought the heavies in tonight.
We got the band back together again.
Yep, no question. And you present a good case, as I would expect. When this was originally proposed, despite the flack that I got from people in town, I was excited about this concept. This was a stay work play. This was proposed as a
True mixed use.
true mixed use. It was a young professionals moving in here, the Fidelities, the Elberts, all of them. This is what it was proposed at, something that we needed. What I don't see now is the support pieces that go along with that. I don't see a bank. I don't see a salon. I don't see a fitness center. I see this little tiny restaurant that is not going to serve the number of residences that are in here. It's just not big enough. There's only one. I was excited to have a conference center We don't have a conference center in this town. We desperately need one. The fact that you were gonna build us a conference center to go with that hotel, that was exciting. It's all gone. That's my issue. You hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
And I'm.
We
I'm
were
in the-
excited, just for the record, we were very excited about that plan too.
I know you were, and you sold it, and I understand. I've been in the industry. I understand the industry. I understand the changes to the market. But I think you could still do some of that in here that would complement the increased residential. There's nothing that complements the increased residential in here. You need it. That would go a long way towards true mixed use. That's just my cut on this. Go.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. Anybody else? Go ahead, Ms. Healy.
Couple of things I'm not excited about. First of all, another 208 apartments that are probably going to go for what your other apartments go for. So, which means that most of the people living in Merrimack, if they wanted to move into a different apartment, wouldn't be able to afford them. Not that, I'm asking for workforce housing, but I'm looking for something a little more affordable. And then you say, well, we need those 208. Well, in the last 2 years, Merrimack has put in about 1,500 apartments. So, yeah. Secondly, what kind of bothers me here is we already got 200 and something people living there. We got the hotel, and this is why I always like a traffic study that includes and encompasses the whole plan and campus. Because now we add another minimally 208 cars, but nobody is a one-car family for the most part, which means if you have a couple, now you got 2 cars. And you got a mall sitting over there that adds to the traffic burden. So, I said this the last time, that little rotary, we call them in Massachusetts,
Roundabout.
traffic circle,
Roundabout.
whatever you want to call them.
Thank
Well,
you,
roundabout
Alistair.
to me is that thing in the playground that you spin around and get thrown off of.
No, that's a merry-go-round.
But anyways, because I don't see another entrance here. So if I live there and it's Black Friday and I'm trying to get home after working for 8 hours, I can't get home.
I want a bar at the entrance.
Say what?
I want a bar at the entrance.
Because that person's going to need it after they've sat
That's
in
right.
traffic trying to get in there. So, something to consider. You need another entrance. Already you've got way past 400 additional cars, maybe 5, and we're not counting the traffic from the 100-room hotel there. So anyways, yeah. And I'm not really crazy about the way your existing units look. So I think you're trying to make probably a more futuristic look to the buildings or whatnot, but just remember that's not Merrimack either. But I worry about the traffic. I worry about premium outlets and the ability of customers to get in there. I worry about residents being able to get into their own houses. Whatever.
Well, just so you know, all of the traffic studies that have been done by Robin Bauza at VHB since the beginning, and they have actually, tracked the performance of those studies against real world conditions. So they've been able to calibrate everything, and the latest traffic study that was prepared for this 208 units, it didn't have the expanded commercial use, but that's not going to create a huge amount of traffic. Was well within the capacity of that roadway system to handle. The other thing that you need to understand is that the town created the situation where we have one access to this property. That's the only access we have. That's the only, and there's never going to be another access. So that's what we need to live with. But the roadway capacity is there to deal with this, with this level of development. Like I said, the approved level of development would actually have higher peak hour traffic impacts than this. So, just so you know, to give you some context there.
Well, I'm still waiting for the day. I haven't been on board as long as Ms. Christensen has, but I'm still waiting for the day when I get a traffic study that says, don't do it.
Well, that's because
Not gonna
it doesn't mean that there aren't those, but you know, you don't see them
But
because
they
we
don't
make
sit in the
changes to the
traffic.
project.
They don't sit in the traffic and they don't get to complain.
I guess the one issue I'm not in the industry like Lynn is. I've been on this board for, I don't know, maybe up to almost, what, 8 years now? But
Time flies.
all I keep hearing is that retail, there's zero want for retail. You guys are not the only ones in this town that are doing something similar to this concept. There's one right down the street with multiple retail store, all full, doing good business. 4 restaurants, a bank. Go even further down the street, there's another one, multiple restaurants, dry cleaners, jewelry. I mean, when I hear you say that there's zero want, I think what you really mean is that the retail doesn't bring as large, quick money as residential does, which I appreciate. But that's not what I'm looking at when I'm approving a mixed use plan. I'm not an investor, so I want you to be successful, yes, as every other person in town that comes before the board, yes, but that's just not what I'm looking at. We gave you a lot of residential, and you want even more, and like Lynn said, this is, I hate to use the word token, but that's what this is, token commercial. Just a little block down here so we can say that, yeah, there's not all apartments. I think the want is there. Like I said, I'm not in the industry, I get it, but we don't have a town full of empty storefronts.
Support services. Retail can be support services.
There you go.
And I think that's doable.
Well, I guess I would turn that around and say, if 10,000 square feet isn't enough, what's enough? I mean, because clearly 150,000 square feet is
Too
not
much.
going to happen.
Right.
So is 15,000 square feet enough? Is 20,000 square feet enough? I mean, there is no standard in your ordinance. So, you know, we're left to our own devices here. And we want to work with the town to get something done that you like and that, you know, makes money for our clients.
Poor old Tom.
For poor old Tom. So,
All right, Jeff.
and you know, there are exigencies that we need to deal with. You know, we have to provide enough parking for everybody. We have to provide enough, and it's you know, you guys know as much as well as anybody else that it's kind of a push and pull thing. So, we don't want to go back to the drawing board, go through all kinds of angst with our potential tenants and partners, and then come back and say, well, you know, it's still not enough. You know, I mean, I'd like to know what you think might be appropriate, because we don't want to play this game any more than you do.
I don't know square footage, but I know what support services are I want to see. How big is a bank? I don't know. It doesn't have
Well,
to be a
bank's like
huge one.
3,500 square feet or so.
All right, so you got that. How big is a hair salon? How big is 2 more restaurants? I want a casual, I want an upscale, I want
Maybe
a
a coffee
fa-
shop.
Coffee shop. You know, can you take the end of that building that is closest to the drive-in? As you come in, you've got the restaurant and the commercial on the left. Can you take that wing of the building and put some of those support services in there? I want the support services.
At least on the ground floor.
Yeah.
If not,
Yeah.
I understand you don't want that much square footage. I get that point.
Yeah.
Well, it really boils down to parking too, because
Right.
if you occupy that space with non-residential use, you're also
Right.
not parking it. You know,
Correct.
so because there's parking on the ground floor of those residential buildings. So,
You're hearing what I'm saying.
Yeah, I am.
And
This is Tom Monahan, and
I know.
if I may.
Absolutely.
They told me to shut up, but
That's all right.
But
You have
they-
insight.
They we went in and talked to Robert and Tim, and talked about the issue of what are we going to put there, and I've got, I don't know, my fingerprints are over a lot of units in residential units in southern New Hampshire. And I'm a residential advocate, chairman of the Nashua Housing Authority for many years, 30-something years, and we do a lot of affordable housing there, and we do some market rate housing as well. But we went in and talked to Tim and Robert, and I said, I'd like to do some more residential because I know that's going to work. And they said, that's the right place to go. So with them saying that, we went into the zoning board, asked for 208 units, and got it.
No, you got permission to increase the density, but you did not get a number from the zoning board.
Up to 208 units, Lynn.
Okay?
Up to 208 units was the Robert was, yeah.
Okay.
Up to 208
Okay.
units. And so then that's what started this whole process. And, I made sure that the abutters were aware of what was going on. We made sure we weren't going to get any closer to the residential abutters. That was very important to me, especially, well, of course, I created the problem when I owned the outlet land. When I developed Whittier Place, I created 62 abutters that didn't sort of like me when we were doing the outlets. Mistake number one. But, so that's how we got here, how we got to you folks at the last conceptual. And we just said, what can we do to placate the planning board and the residents? And hence Gordon came up with this design, which we talked about having the urban entrance, which was discussed at the last conceptual, the mindset of an urban entrance. Create the sidewalks, do some parallel parking as you come in. A mini Third Ave, if you would, but in Burlington. So that's how it all began, and that's how we got here. In talking about the retail, if I'm going to build retail, I'm going to have to rent it for $50 a foot. And they can go down to those places that are full and rent for $15 a foot. That's the problem I'm encountering. And I don't know if that's going to change ever. So I can't spend millions and try to get pennies. You know what will be there? My tombstone right in the middle of that vacant lot. So that's my mentality. That's how I'm thinking. Yeah, we said in our discussions, 10,000 or 15,000 square feet, whatever it is, that's what we were thinking about. Those other uses, the retail or offices, talking about an insurance company, the workout place you mentioned, that the clubhouse is 7,000 square feet, of which 3,500 is a workout area. So that takes care of that.
Yep.
There are a few offices in there. It's a really nice, I invite you to go through it. They've done it. It's a real nice job. But that's how we got here. And we're trying to,
At least more restaurants.
bars.
Yeah, so I think, I'm fine with the density. I live on Cambridge Drive, so I'm not directly abutting this property. But in my mind, what we were hoping was kind of like an assembly row, if you're familiar with that project. So first floor retail, apartments above. Like when you showed the conceptual of the restaurant and the commercial space, I was like, throw apartments above it, Obviously, parking is an issue, and how to solve that and still, make it pencil, I totally understand. That's kind of my take. On this plan, is the center of this new apartment building going to be paved?
This area here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's parking.
Okay.
So there's parking underneath this part of the building.
Not enough.
And then
You have to have it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gone through the parking calcs and this has in excess of what would be normally required for a project like this. So, I'm not without concern about parking, but, parking is less of an issue than some of these other, the use configuration that we're talking about.
Okay. Because
One thing we may be able to do, putting restaurants in this residential building is kind of a technical issue because you have venting problems that you have to deal with. And there's potentially noise issues and so forth.
Particularly if you put a sports bar in.
Yeah. So, but
But it would
I
be
mean,
nice.
and frankly, the parking requirements for restaurants are probably, at least an order of magnitude higher than for retail use. But I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I guess I don't want to go to the mat for one particular use if we just come back and we're having the same conversation. So
I know it's hard, but I'm going back to what I was originally excited about.
Yeah.
And I'm not excited. I'm sorry, I'm just not excited. I understand all the reasoning for it. I understand the business model for it.
well, and the other thing is that there's a lot of water over the dam here. I mean, I think it's a little beyond the pale to talk about this as if it were a brand new project because it's not. I mean, it's just not. So, for better or worse, we're just trying to figure out how to get out of this and still have our heads attached to our bodies. So, and not have a headstone instead. So, okay. I don't know whether we're going to get much further with this discussion tonight.
Maybe the hotel goes in that wing.
the hotel's approved already.
Well, I understand. But maybe it gets moved to that wing and you use where the hotel is. I don't know. I'm throwing out ideas without any of the background or anything else.
And really the way that you have to look at this is that each one of these buildings has a need for parking.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And the way this plan is configured, it magically works
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the number of parking spaces that the tenants are looking for versus the number of parking spaces that are there, whether they're, going to be shared, in some fashion or not, right? So, and the whole shared parking thing becomes more complicated when you have a heavier residential use. But that's not to say that there isn't shared parking. And the fact is that peak is likely, the peaks for the various uses aren't going to happen at the same time. So, so we have some flexibility, but the reality is that you got to make each one of these uses work for each one of these tenants. So, that's the trick. That being said, there may be a way that we can figure out to, perhaps trade some spaces and, for their part, the developer is reluctant to give up a vested right that he has. So, there's a leap of faith here that, is partially embodied in reconfiguration of that restaurant pad and that, because the utilities are already in, the parking is already in, everything's already there. And so, I guess the message is that we're trying to work with you.
Mhm. Tom has always tried to work with us, and he's done it very well, and he has a history of doing it and trying to do what is right for the town. There's no doubt in my mind, and I will tell everybody that. So
I appreciate that, man.
Ms. Healy.
So are these 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom
They're a
apartments?
combination of 1 and 2, well, studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Okay. So you're not expecting a lot of kids?
There won't be, there will
Because
be
I'm not
hardly
seeing
any kids. in
any
this.
place for a kid to play.
No, there will be hardly any children.
And what
in
you're
this
showing is green space. Is that walkable to walk a dog?
There is a series of pathways throughout the site. There are places that we could create as not a dog park, but places to walk dogs. The green area up toward the top of the plan is buffer.
I was
That's
gonna say, it's
currently
the buffer
treed,
for the-
and
yeah.
we're not proposing to desecrate any of those trees.
No, good. Thank you. I feel like this is a deja vu moment. We probably asked you that already. last
No,
time.
well, maybe you didn't ask me because I'm kind of new to this program again, but there is some space that we could create for that.
Make it warmer and friendly.
Board members, anything further?
For me.
Anybody wish to put some opinions in? Robert, you
just
look like you
by
have something.
way of reminder, I know this obviously is not a public hearing, but we did receive the one email from one of the abutting residents.
Let me take a guess.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
What am I doing? I am going to
I'll tell you a funny story.
eject this.
Not bad.
I do have it here, Robert. I don't know if you want me to read the whole thing. It's about 5 or 6 paragraphs, but I can summarize it.
I guess being that it is not a public hearing, so it's not required. I do have a copy that I did provide the applicant. I think summary is probably appropriate, but the full email is at least available in the file, and it is
Posted.
and now with the applicant.
Okay. This is an abutter, Miss Burns. She wishes us to know that she has a few concerns. One being that there's very little room for walkways, trees, privacy from the abutters. She's worried that the apartments are slightly closer to the abutters than they currently were, since they're right behind their home. She's touching upon what we already touched upon, that she's worried about the lack of retail. And that's about it. Once again, touching on the town facilities, water usage, trash noise, stuff like that.
Yeah.
He gave you a copy of the letter.
Yes.
Correct.
And
Okay.
just so you know, there hasn't been any proposed change in the proximity of this building to the
Nope,
property.
I'm aware. I'm aware. And also
we're
to touch,
very cognizant of the issues there.
Not to sound biased in any way, but once again, these apartments do not come anywhere close to using the amount of resources that a single family home does when it comes to school children, trash, water. I sit on the MVD board. I can tell you they do not come close to what my house, any one of our single family houses use for town utilities.
Yeah, fire protection is probably the more important
Correct.
piece. And, we're fortunate to be a part of the overall site's fire protection system, so that's good.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to get that out there
Somebody
because I know that's
planned that. I don't know.
that's a major that's a major point of contention, and I try to spread that as much as possible, that these apartments that are going up are not eating into town revenue as much as people believe they are. They are actually providing revenue. With this one specifically, I'm just worried about the mixture. That's it.
Okay.
So
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
One last question for you.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any deed restrictions on this property? Has Simon placed any restrictions on
Yes, there are deed covenants,
it? Okay.
like a non-compete kind of
Got
kind
it.
of deed covenant.
Okay.
So that's a complication as
Yeah,
well.
because I'm a retail broker, so I do this a lot. But obviously, if you're under a lot of restrictions, that I would understand why, putting retail in your center would be difficult. So,
Yeah.
fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Mr.
again.
Leedy, Mr. Monahan. Was Merrimack Parcel A. Wow. Ooh, not done yet. All right. Agenda item number 11, discussion possible actions regarding other items of concern. Robert, do we have any tonight?
I have nothing tonight.
Board members, any items of concern? Not seeing any. Moving on to the next. Approval of minutes from November the 1st.
I move we approve as distributed.
Second that.
Motion made by Ms. Christensen, seconded by Halim. Do I have any input? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, all abstaining. Robert, I am abstaining. So that is 302 to approve the minutes. Item number 13, adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Christensen.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Dano. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, all abstaining. That is 500 to abstain. Thank you very much, board members. Please remember to turn off your microphones.